go straight into branded residence versus shared ownership, navigating the future of hospitality real estate. Real estate has come up a number of times. And please allow me to introduce to stage Samantha Muna, and she will be our moderator for the next panel. A round of applause, please, as she comes here.
Well, thank you. We're going to keep this very short because we are running out of time. So I'm going to quickly ask my panelists to come on board. Kevin, who's been here earlier this morning, Oussama, and Titus. Please do come on. Thank you. So this is a very interesting topic. It's been the buzz topic in hotel conferences or hotel investment conferences for the last year or so. It's not quite a topic that has been explored in depth in Africa. So we're going to try and unpack that and try and understand what these global trends are out there and how we can capitalize on them here in Africa. So to introduce the panel, I'm going to ask each of them a question, and then they can introduce themselves as they answer the question. So trying to just take this forward and keep it short. So I'm going to start with you, Kevin. You've been on stage before, earlier this morning. So the question to you, what are some of the global trends that you're seeing in branded residences, and how do they apply to Africa?
Thank you, Samantha. I mean, no need to be introduced. I was told I've got the longest surname. She couldn't sleep last night to pronounce it. But anyway, so I've been involved over my last 25 years in real estate from an investment, but also development and also M&A perspective, covering hospitality, retail, and residential, and mixed use, etc. Globally, it's an interesting topic. The last couple of years, I've been spending quite a lot of time in Dubai as well. The big buzz is in branded residences, right? Now, I think we need to unpack that, what it means, because everything is an evolution, right? If you look at, the 5 needs of human being, from food, shelter, etc., from the cave people, shelter is a must, right? But we've seen how this has evolved. Now, what's happening in other markets, global markets, and very often in our part of the world, we're sort of lagging, which is also a good thing because then we can actually learn from their mistakes and we can tweak it to make things better. Now, if you look at the global perspective, which is also hitting our shores, is property is becoming more expensive, be it whether you go to London, Paris, or Joburg, or Cape Town. I mean, I've looked at prices here, it's just ballistic, crazy, right? So that's putting pressure on your younger generation in terms of them getting into the property ownership ladder, right? That's number one. Number two, there's definitely a change of what people want, right? I mean, in terms of lifestyle, if you're married in a couple, both persons are working, so you need that support and assistance. And people these days don't live in extended families. I mean, because unfortunately, we used to live maybe 30, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, where you had the grandpa, the grandma would look after the kids, etc. All this has been fragmented. That's the reality in a lot of parts of our continent, especially in the metro cities. Now, having said that, what I'm seeing from globally, and I'm seeing that in some of the markets in Africa as well, including my small place, Mauritius, which is a small place as well, people are moving more and more to mixed-use development because they want a place where they can get things very easily, whether it's a hospital, which our dear Nigerian lady spoke about, whether it's education, whether it's going shopping, whether it's doing the laundry, etc., right? So I think the next step, when I'm seeing the evolution, and I think we're going to see that in the next 5 years, the same way we've seen hotel operators, we're going to see brands now, hospitality brands, actually positioning themselves in that space. Then in addition to that, it's coming at the right time because the hotel operators, and I hope they'll forgive me here, we'll still be friends, competition is getting hotter because all of a sudden now you're getting non-hoteliers getting in the space, whether it's your Mercedes, Bugattis, and whatnot. I mean, you're like, these guys used to do cars, and now they're in that space. So for me, the next couple of years, we're going to see this fast tracking. And I think it's important for developers to not be stuck in a time warp. Actually say, what is it that our new generation is looking for? And those branded residences is the way to go. I see a great opportunity.
Excellent, excellent. That's a good introduction. Oussama, over to you. You can introduce yourself as you answer how you define the difference between branded residences and shared ownership, and what the audience needs to understand as we define branded residences in the world today.
Sure. So I've been in the industry for some time as well, collected a few medals, worked with CBRE, JLL, now Knight Frank, have been with the operators as well, Accor, Radisson, to name a few. And the difference between shared ownership and branded residences, I would say shared ownership is a residential product that most of you are familiar with. We all need houses where to live. Branded residences is a product that is essentially first residential, but then that is enhanced with a hospitality component. So that enhancement basically takes three forms. One of them is design. So a lot of the brand residence owners or end occupiers want to recreate that sort of, I'd say, emotional connection that they have with the brand. So design plays a very big aspect of it. Another element is facilities, amenities, services. You want to have breakfast, you want to have a spa, you want to have meeting rooms. So a lot, I'd say, revolves around design and the operations themselves. The last part is related to revenue generation. So if you buy a unit, you can lease it freely, and it would be regulated by a sort of residential legislation in place. If you have a branded residence, it becomes a bit more complicated. So there is obviously a premium in revenue related to it, but there are also some constraints in terms of how you lease it. You could put it back into a rental pool and give it to the operator for them to manage it as a hospitality unit. Or you could lease it, but there are some constraints around it, making sure that there is no competition between what you're doing in the hotel nearby. So I'd say those are the sort of biggest differences. So design, services, and revenue generation between those two models.
Okay. Now, Titus, over to you. Give us an idea of what you see as a prediction, given what has been discussed this morning. What would you see as a prediction of the future of branded residences in Africa?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Samantha.
Sorry, and also introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've also been in the industry from the supply side. We've been designing and building hotels for over 44 years as a company, but myself over 27 years. I see the future because of the growth in people who have more disposable income, the ultra high network individuals growing, especially in Africa. I see that demand for luxury living growing, but luxury living that is more contextualized to the nuances of Africa, because you can plug and play, plug them in wherever you want, but I think where the demand is at that level where you get that contextualized piece of architecture coming in, I see that there's the greater demand. I also see governments having to yield really to support this infrastructure. They can't hold on for longer. So I see that yielding, spurring some level of growth, and especially one of the beautiful things about Africa is that the destination has the natural impact, the natural effects to allow for luxury living to flourish. So if you had the changes that you need to do, then you should be able to naturally grow that portfolio. So I see growth in those demands, but more importantly, I see the demand growing because of that impact that you have in population who have more disposable income growing. Thank you.
Thank you. Leading on to that, and you talked about governments having to yield. Kevin, I'm going to come to you and ask you about the legislation piece. When it comes to branded residences, there's a couple of layers of contractual agreements that have to be put in place. Are you seeing that the environment in many African countries is ready for the layers of legislation that need to be put in place, or contracts that need to be put in place to support branded residences?
Good one. Which is interesting, I sit on the board of a hotel group that's expanding in Zanzibar, and the hustle we're getting through to just making sure the title deed is sanitized, for example. I mean, the reality was we way back, right? Now, what I think is going to happen, maybe some markets are doing it, I've started seeing some markets doing it, using technology now to digitize, right? Much quicker, right? The interesting thing is when I go to these markets, the youngsters get it. Unfortunately, those who are in power don't get it because of the generation gap, right? Okay. But I'm a great believer the youngsters are going to make the difference, one way or the other, right? Now, in some markets which are ahead, obviously South Africa is ahead, we know that, right? It's one of the most efficient markets on the continent. And then if you look at Nairobi as an example, I was thinking, one of the, let's call it branded, even though it's not branded, internationally branded residences, lately in Nairobi is Inaki project, right? Inaki is a mixed use, they've created a very fantastic development. But I think when you speak to the developer who've done that, with good intention, I think we do a disservice to ourselves, not actually going to international market, taking best practice. Now, I'm not saying that we have to copy-paste. It's about tweaking, because in international practice, they've made errors. And I think we can learn from them and tweak, right, better, right? So having said that, in those markets, including Nairobi, I mean, you would know, obviously, being from there. Still today, when you speak to residential developers who are selling to the market, etc., they'll tell you, once they've sold, they see their building going down 5 or 10 years later because the facilities management is not there, it's not professionalized. So I think that's something which we need to focus on, bring talent. And I do believe we have talents on the continent. If we need to bring expertise from outside to help us grow, etc., because we need to get that right, on facilities management. Once you get that right, then this thing about branded residences as part of mixed-use developments, etc., that as well, it can be complicated. I've been on developments where you start with good intention, and then 5 years later, the hotel owner tells you, hey, I don't want to pay the levy because there are too many residents who are actually spoiling the road to my infrastructure, etc. So all these, I think, if you go to other markets, there are lessons learned that we can take from there and bring that home in terms of best practice. Now, what I'm hoping is obviously in Kenya, the likes of our friends, I don't know if they're here, the likes of Knight Frank, the JLLs, the CBREs, they should actually be the brains, bring that best practice to our markets. So that's what I'm really hoping.
Learning from the best and learning from what others have made mistakes. So Knight Frank being right next to you, Oussama, the big question is the global hotel hospitality brands are really big on this branded residence, but we're not seeing it in Africa. What do you think some of those challenges are? We're seeing more independent branded residences, and the panel before us talked about all their mixed-use developments. Yeah. How can we now bring in the global brands into this space?
So I'll put back my developer hat that I had in the past. Essentially, I think there are some, I'd say, if you build, and I would expect in Africa not yet to have standalone branded residences. So in lots of cases, they would be associated with hotels. The hotels would service those properties. And the hotels come with their lot of design standards that must be reflected in costs, right? So if you have a certain hotel that is supposed to look a certain way and have certain materials, you would expect these as well to be reflected in the branded residence component, maybe toned down a little bit, but still quite present. So there is an asset class where you have a sort of completely different dynamic in terms of revenue generation. Your room nights may be sold in dollars. You have a lot of, I'd say, it's a well-studied mechanism. And then you have a branded residential class that is meant to be developed at a similar cost or maybe slightly lower. So if you look at those costs and you have to import those materials and bring it down to complying with those brand standards, then in lots of cases the equation doesn't add up. In addition to that, when I would be approached by a developer, and this is a way that operators do as well to mitigate the risk because they don't have control the same way they do over a hotel. They have less control over residential units because they're sold. So they would ensure that that developer has sufficient funding on the side in case something goes south. They want to ensure some bank guarantee mechanisms. And a lot of these, I'd say, risk mitigation factors, and in many cases, those conditions are not met right now in Africa. So I would say financing is one aspect of it in terms of guarantees to be provided, and the other one is simply market. So if you're building for $5,000 per square meters, but your local market sells at $6,000, then it would be difficult to add up that equation, for instance. So that's in a nutshell the reason why we don't see them yet. But we do see them in some markets where you have the premiums. In North Africa, for instance, we do see that. Morocco has a branded Fairmont property. There are many properties that have been signed recently in Egypt, North Coast, and it goes from your typical hotel operator to your Nobu, and it's becoming much more diversified. So in markets where I'd say rates per square meter enabled it and developers have that sort of financial capacity, it would definitely be achievable, and it's on the way.
Can I just add, which is interesting, you brought the example, I mean, we didn't rehearse that, but
no,
the Fairmont Royal Palm in Marrakesh, for example, I used to be on the board of the owner, and we saw how, before we actually brought Fairmont, because it's in a precinct with a golf with residential, the development was struggling. Yeah. As soon as we brought Fairmont, the uptake, not just for the hotel, even for the villas, which helped to fast-track the development as well. So we've seen that in Morocco, and I've seen that as well in Mauritius. With Radisson Blu, we did a development which is called Azuri, which now has got around 1,000 units. Because of the brand, people feel, hey, you know, I get service around it. I get international. I say to people, hey, I live in a residential estate, branded Radisson or whatever it is. I'm willing to pay 20% or 25% more premium.
Yep. And I guess it takes away that part where you talked about where developments then fall apart or start deteriorating in 5 to 7 years, because then now you've got an operator who's going to try and keep the standards. But that's where we come to the difference between branded residences and shared ownership. And this I sent to Titus, where you look and say, maybe it's a mixed-use development. We put a hotel, and then the villas or the apartments around it may not necessarily be branded because of the cost that you talked about, but are still part of that same precinct and are affiliated or are integrated service-wise into the hotel. So they're not branded, but they are part of that shared ownership. Just talk through that and the examples that you've seen, or what the developers have told you are the challenges of going full-on branded.
I think it's speaking to that friction that you normally have between operators, developers, and owners. Because you see, as the developer wants to exit the property much early, so the many buyers he can get to buy the properties which are residential, the better for him, because he exits the property early. Then the problem is the operator would want to have a certain amount of volume that they can control. So if you can get a sweet spot where you can get a minimum number for the operator to operate as the available rooms or whatever, then you should be able to get the operator happy. The new owners can buy their properties and run them the way they want, or you could secure a small portion from the new owners as part of those branded residences. So you may not necessarily need to brand the entire development. And we're currently involved in one of that kind of development where we're bifurcating the component that we don't really need the operator to be part of.
Okay. So because of time, I think we've got about 50 seconds left. So we might not be able to ask too many questions. And we've tried to keep this as short as possible, but it's a big topic and it's got a lot of moving parts. Any questions from the audience, any burning question that we can try and break down for you or answer for you? Just one, we're allowed one question. She's shaking her head, so, there's pressure here. So anyway, because we're not allowed any questions, I think we're going to then wrap it up from here. But you can catch us outside during the break, and we can try and help answer any more questions. But this is a topic that needed a lot more time than we were allocated. It is an exciting topic, and it's one of the future trends that we're going to see in hospitality in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much.